歡迎各位又嚟到加國生活會，逢晚上11點至12點喺 FM105.9廣播。Welcome to the FM 1059 Cantonese Radio, the Canada Living Program. On the line we have the honorary guest Justin Poy, 伍雋雄, as well as our program host Josephine Poy. 佢係 Mississauga 華專商會嘅副會長。Josephine Poy, how shall we start today?
Okay, thank you. Welcome to our special guest, Justin Poy. May is Asian Month. This is a time to recognize our high achievers in our community, right? And Justin has a lot of talents and accomplishments. He has, very special talent in marketing. He has his own company, and he is a financier in the marketing, the financial sector. Also, he is a strong supporter of Asian heritage. That's why he has been, working on the board as patron for 8 or more years already. So really welcome, Justin. We're so happy that you can, spare us some time tonight. The first question, we want to really start. I know that you have done so much. You have done so much. You're already kickstart already. So tell us about your Asian Heritage program. That is start, broadcasting already, on YouTube.
So Asian Heritage Month is celebrated across the country. In Ontario, the Canadian Foundation for Asian Culture is probably one of the largest organizations that host Asian Heritage Month events. And in fact, this past year, we were hosting events all throughout the year. And I'm the honorary patron of the organization. And we have amazing programs taking place all throughout the month of May. But this year is the 20th anniversary. So it's actually been 20 years since the declaration of Asian Heritage Month. So I decided that I was going to interview very special Asian Canadians. I specifically picked people from many different sectors. We've got some interesting actors that have broken through barriers. I've interviewed Deputy Police Chief Peter Yun. I'm going to be interviewing some scientists who made their mark in Canada. And I really want to highlight, especially during a time of heightened racism and this horrible trend of Asian hate, I wanted to make sure that we highlight some of our most accomplished Asians, both from all our Asian communities, not just Chinese, from Pakistan, from India, from Vietnam. I want to make sure that we show Canadians what Asians have contributed to this country, because it's really through understanding people that you begin to appreciate them. It's very easy to hate somebody you don't know. If you never know their name, you don't know where they're from, it's very easy to hate them. And it's very easy to lump people into one big group. Those are the people I don't like. But the moment you start to know people and you know their name and you know they're from, you know their history, then it becomes very different. It becomes more personal. And I think that's what we must do as all Asians during Asian Heritage Month, is not only celebrate amongst ourselves, but also put on a platform so that all Canadians can appreciate our culture. There is that saying that if you keep amongst yourself, then it is partly your fault if people don't understand you. So very often, and I know this because obviously we are all part of the Chinese community. The Chinese community has a tendency to keep to itself. If you keep to yourself, nobody has the chance to be let in. So this is a great month to kick off those kind of programs of understanding, but it must not just stop at the end of May. May can be like the catalyst to continue activities all throughout the year.
Yeah, Justin, you are a very natural speaker, right? And you come to the sense that I can probably interpret a little bit more. 咁Justin 咧就佢啱講咧就話今個月5月係即係每年嘅 Asian Heritage Month， 即係亞洲傳統節日。 咁咧喺呢個節日，因為今年係第20年，所以咧個意義係特別重要嘅。At the same time，我哋家下好多嘅 Asian hatred 嘅 crime 係 skyrocket 嘅，咁佢覺得咧就有必要咧就做得更好，所以佢咧就開始咧其中一樣嘢，佢覺得咧話華裔社區好多人咧就 keep it to themselves， 即係佢哋即係做咗好多 achievement 咧，其實唔係好多人知。如果唔係好多人知嗰陣時 ，at the same time 咧就會令到個社區或者即係整體個即係加拿大或者多倫多或者 Vancouver Cross Canada 好多人咧對我哋中國人其實唔係好了解我哋做過啲咩嘢啦，咁所以佢就 interview 咗一啲喺即係喺成就上面咧做得好多嘅人，咁啊譬如好似副Deputy Police Officer 啊袁直面啦，咁仲有其他嘅即係 entrepreneur 啊或者 scientist 啊，佢哋嗰啲係可以話到俾大家聽，佢哋係喺加拿大嘅社會係做咗好多貢獻。咁如果咧我哋呢啲咁嘅 conversation 咧繼續落去咧，令到好多人更加了解我哋，有明白就有信任。咁所以佢覺得呢樣嘢唔係淨係喺 Asian Heritage Month 可以做到，甚至乎可以繼續延續，咁啊令大家識得即係更多即係我中國人係做啲係什麼類嘅人。咁啊 now you know I don't know whether I get 45%, but hopefully I'll get something.
100. Oh my gosh, your memory is really amazing. Right?
It depends on the speaker. So if you can tell the story, I can present the story. You know, if they cannot, they beat around the bush. What are you trying to say, brother? Yeah.
See, okay. Justin, you just have to come back because you have so much for us to
exactly.
Yeah, to find out, right? To discover. Now, what is like this is a very nice program, right? Where did you get the inspiration from?
Well, I actually, so you were right. We talked before the broadcast, and I do have a background in broadcasting. I actually worked at CTV before and on Canada AM, and so I had gone, got my degree in broadcasting. And I always wanted to have a talk show. Now, I did have a talk show for a while on Rogers. It was called Philanthropy Today, and I interviewed all of the big charities and talk to their CEOs and what is their cause and things like that. But, I work in advertising now. I have my own advertising firm. I miss that whole, where I love learning about people. I love talking to people, and I love learning about them and learning where they're from. Very often when we meet people in our everyday life, you really need to sit down and talk to them and really draw out what is it that makes them who they are, because that enriches my life too. So I thought, you know what, it's the 20th anniversary of Asian Heritage Month. I see this as a very unique tool to help, not only as a permanent record of some of our most accomplished Asian Canadians, but also, to help rest of Canada understand who we are as a people. Yeah.
Right, I absolutely agree with you. We have to keep on doing, not just really for Asian Month. I think, the Asians tend to be really shy or subdued. We hide our accomplishments because that's what our parents and grandparents told us, oh, don't brag. Don't brag, don't boast, okay? You have to be subdued in order to get more from heaven. Get more blessing. So that's our cultural tradition.
我使唔使做個少少 interpretation？因為 Justin 個即係佢basically 就想同大家講咧，佢原本身係一個 journalist。佢亦都喺 CBC 做過一個 program 叫 philanthropist， 咁 philanthropist 嘅意思咧就慈善家咁佢最主要咧就即係訪問好多即係喺社會上面咧就做咗好多貢獻啊 CEO 啊或者大企業嘅總裁啊，咁然之後 you have to you know these people as much as they are in the public figure， 佢哋 behind 佢哋係做過啲咩嘢，嗰個先每個人都有個 story 咁樣，咁呢啲 story 就係令到大家容易明白。咁所以Justin 咧就 build on 呢一樣咁嘅 concept， 就希望咧就 do the same thing 喺個華裔社區嗰度，令到我哋即係譬如 Josephine Pow 佢喺社會咧做咗好多嘢，一個 interview 咧將佢個 story 咧即係可以講晒出嚟。咁 I think this is the best things for people to learn, how great the Chinese community, what kind of people that we had, and we are a great contribution to the society.
And the one thing that let's take geopolitics. When you look at two countries at war, there are many examples in history where two countries or more could be at war or be at odds, but they still agree on culture and art and sports. You know, the Olympics is like that, right? I mean, the Olympics is the one time all countries, doesn't matter if they're adversaries, they come together, they put all of that aside, and they learn to appreciate and just have fun playing the games.
Exactly.
Art can be the same thing. When we're looking at anti-Asian hate right now, we can say, you know what, yes, there's groups that don't like us, and you know, and we're feeling it, but you know what? When it comes to culture and art, let's share that, because that is where everybody can put their differences aside. How can you argue about a beautiful painting? How can you argue about beautiful dance or music? You can't argue about that. Everybody can appreciate that, and that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah, Justin 講咧就即係話，其實咧我哋可能咧就因為好多唔同嘅原因，我哋有 geopolitical 嘅 different， 即係意思係唔同地區啊，或者我哋政治嘅取向唔同。咁但係我哋可以 always find a common ground， 我哋有啲嘢係大家有共同嘅理想嘅、共同嘅分享嘅。譬如咧話，譬如好似藝術啦，或者 dance 啦，或者甚至乎食品啦嗰啲咁，全部都係可以就 link up together。甚至乎譬如話，我哋係大家可能咧對於 fundraising 啊，某一個 hospital 啊，大家都係共同話想即係個 for example sick kid hospital， 就 you know like we can do the fundraise together as long as 我哋有個同一個目標。就算你係有即係啲咩 different， 但係當我哋做緊一樣嘢嗰陣時，我哋共同目標，我哋就係大家齊心，咁我哋 become friends。咁呢個係相當之好嘅結果啊 ，yeah。
Right, yeah. So actually, Justin is so good because we talk about, what we are going to cover. He already started talking about how we are going to combat, anti-Asian hate. There are people facing, each day different assaults, different, inconvenience or really physical, right? So Justin, for the common people, do you have any other suggestions how we can deal with it?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. First of all, let's just look at why there's a spike now in Asian hate. Has been around for a long time. Okay, I mean, we know, for those of us who have studied Chinese Canadian history, we know the history of the head tax. We know the history of racism all throughout the decades. So it's not something new. It is something that has now spiked. Now, I like to look at it this way. For those of, I am a Chinese Canadian who's born, I'm second generation. I was born here. My parents are from Hong Kong. For somebody to say to me, hey, I remember when the coronavirus, it hadn't even come to Canada yet. It was big in the news internationally. It was horrible what was happening in China, but it hadn't come here yet. Now, I have many Caucasian friends. I went to meet with them and they said, hey, Corona guy. Now, does that make any sense? I'm born here. I'm just as much Canadian as they are, or maybe even more, right? But here's the thing. If somebody truly believes that you could be infected or spreading a virus merely because you're of the same group, that's completely illogical. I tend not to want to negotiate with illogical people. If people are illogical, there's not too much you're going to do, whether it's a public service announcement campaign, whether it's any kind of effort. There's not much you're going to do to convince somebody who's ignorant, how to appreciate Asian culture. But there are a lot of people in that middle ground. They just simply don't know. For example, I did a radio interview on iHeartRadio right as the coronavirus was coming in, and there were callers. There was a caller. She was an older lady. She wasn't a racist, but she literally said, I love going to the Mandarin, and if I go, should I be worried if one of the Chinese people coughs? You know what? Yes, she's ignorant, but she wasn't racist by any means. People like that, you can educate, you can let them experience culture. And I feel that in Canada, we're such a multicultural country that there's a lot of people who they're not ignorant by choice. They just have no exposure. Okay. You go out to Fredericton, you go out to some small towns on the East Coast or in the prairies. They just don't have the exposure. It is our duty. If we really want things to change, it is our duty as a community to give people that opportunity of exposure. And trust me, the people who are super ignorant or willful ignorance and just mean, those people, I don't really like to. I don't want to waste too much energy on them. The police can deal with them.
Justin, you've got a really good way of looking at things.
Right.
You know, I really appreciate. I can't find a better speaker for this, right？ 即係阿 Justin 正話所講嘅咧，就其實即係我覺得係一個即係幾合理嘅講法。你係講緊話呢個 Asian 嗰個 discrimination racism 咧，已經唔係第一日嘅 throughout the history 人頭稅啊，咁然之後 from time to time it come back 嘅有絕對係有存在嘅。咁但係其實咧好多時咧有即係我哋要唔好忘記啊，即係因為有啲人咧，佢唔係真係即係 racism 嘅。譬如佢曾經喺 iHeartRadio 嗰度做過訪問，咁啊有個 older lady 即係比較老啲嘅女人打電話入嚟，佢話 I like to go to Mandarin restaurant， 呢個就係一個 buffet 嚟嘅，係咪 ？But should I worry about the coronavirus coming from the Chinese？ 咁其實呢個老婆婆絕對咧就即係個講法唔係歧視嘅，佢只不過係擔心。咁其實咧，我哋作為一個社區。作為我哋係一個 Chinese 嘅 community， 我哋其實可能咧就譬如話即係應該咧趁多啲機會，藉呢個問題咧向佢哋解釋，令到佢明白唔係個 coronavirus 係 coming from Chinese 一種係每一個人都可以將呢個 coronavirus 傳播嘅，將呢個信息發俾佢。如果你見到一啲係唔 logical 嘅人，根本上佢冇邏輯嘅，亂咁嚟嘅，亦都係亂咁講。你都唔需要擔心，咁所以我哋個做法就應該咧就將一啲正確嘅信息解釋俾一啲佢哋可以即係有教養，亦都肯接受嘅人咧，就即係解釋呢樣嘢，咁令到嗰個種族歧視或者因為 coronavirus 歧視，即係令到個歧視嗰樣嘢增加嘅，令到佢減低嚇。最主要即係我覺得啊，即係 I think Justin you did really carve out. You know, I can't translate it better than you, but I think people will listen to what you have to say. Yeah.
I think you both did very well, and I learned a lot more from you folks. The only thing I really feel that I think Canadians are so courteous. Sometimes we are not open to each other. We seldom really question and ask, for more. Try to understand more. I think we need a lot of like not everybody work in, a company with mixed diverse background, people of diverse background. So it's really nice to get to know people and what are the sensitivity part that we have to avoid, right? And if possible, we can have, like a big projects, small projects working together so that we will see each other have the same common goal. Right? So,
Josephine, another thing is I keep hearing from friends who are not Chinese. They say, how come the Jewish community, they have, organizations with a very strong voice. How come the Black community, where's the Chinese Black Lives Matter? Where's the Chinese Black Panthers? And I say, you know what? Because we're not like that. And I think that we need to stay true to ourselves. I do have some friends in the Chinese community said, we need to organize, we need to be loud, but that's not who we are. So why don't we look at who we are and do it our way, right? And if we do, I think we do need to be a little more organized, maybe. There is a reason why you don't see, as much representation in Parliament, for example, in the Chinese community. Yes, maybe we do need to get more active and more involved, but I don't think we need to mimic another cultural group. I think we need to stay true to ourselves and do things the way we do them. But obviously, we can do them better. Every group can do it better, but we need to remain true to ourselves.
Justin 剛才講嗰啲係好幾重要下嘅，有好多朋友就唔係中國人嚟嘅，就問阿 Justin 點解猶太裔有個 Holocaust 嘅 group， 然之後咧就 Black people 咧就黑人亦都有個 Black Lives Matter， 點解亞洲人或者中國人冇一個同類型嘅團體？咁其實 Justin 嘅解釋係好，因為我哋其實即係我哋個 culture 係比較上係即係 in harmony 多啲嘅，就比較上就少即係有啲咁嘅更即係做啲咁嘅 advocacy， 但係未必我哋可能咧就可以 come together in a more focus 做呢一樣嘢，因為過去咧好多時係唔同嘅組織做唔同嘅嘢，咁然之後咧就我哋好少 get together。Maybe 呢個係一個 good time 可以咧就 come together 係做 more focus， 但係我哋始終係華裔，我哋未必係 doing the same thing， 好似Holocaust 或者 Black Lives Matter 咁樣啊。大致上係咁。Justin, did I translate correctly or because you understand Cantonese, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
very,
you understand.
Been
Okay,
very
that's
accurate.
really good.
Yeah, your
That's
translation's
really good.
been very accurate, Alec. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Joseph, yeah.
Yeah, actually, you know what, Justin already, you know, got into my next question is about, you know, what's this, you know, like, does he have a vision for the Chinese community? Have the Chinese Canadians, you know, excel themselves already? Have, you know, what are we, you know, where are our potential? Do we still have more potential to forward as a group or as individuals? Have we maximized, you know, our talents, you know, that, you know, what do you think?
Well, okay, that's a very, first of all, Josephine, that's a very big question. But you know what? I think that the moment somebody says they've completely maxed out, then they're selling themselves short. I mean, we will never max out, hopefully. We will always be able to push our envelope. We will always be able to, you know, when you come here, especially, you know, when you come to Canada as an immigrant, there's always that dichotomy. There's that pressure. You know, am I Canadian? Am I Chinese Canadian? Am I Chinese first? Am I Canadian second? Am I Canadian first or Chinese second? There's always that. And even when you're born in Canada, like myself, you still have that, you know, because culture is a very strong thing. And Chinese culture, especially, I find that, you know, some cultures, people seem to assimilate and the culture gets washed out of them very quickly, especially a lot of European cultures. But the Chinese culture, everywhere you go in the world, there will be a Chinatown. There will be, you know, it's just a very strong, rich history we have. And the way we're brought up, it just stays with you. So I find that struggle within ourselves as a community and our own personal identities. Trust me, during Asian Heritage Month, I do a lot of talks to young people about this. You know, I always say when the Olympics are on, who are you rooting for? Are you rooting for Canada? Are you rooting for China? Like who do you get excited the most about, right? It's always that struggle, and that is the Canadian experience. Now within Canada, we have so much more we can do. You know, look at Chinese Canadians, how much effect we have had in Canada from sports. You know, you look at our stars like Patrick Chan, and then you go to business and you know, and then you look at things like, you know, our Hakka community, the Jamaican Chinese. I mean, you know, the Michael Lee Chins, the Ray Changs. I mean, we have so much to contribute to this country. It will never stop. And Canadians have taken notice. There is no way that you could be Canadian and not notice. You know, we have actors that are, you know, Simu Liu, who's going to be in a Marvel film. You know, I mean, it's just incredible how much exposure we have. Now, where we need to work on are the small nuances. So, for example, if you say, you know, 20 years ago, maybe we would say, well, I'd love to see a Chinese actor in a mainstream role. Okay, we've done that now. But now we need to take it to the next step. It shouldn't be a struggle every single time. We shouldn't be in the movies only when there is a movie about Famulan or a movie about the Joy Luck Club or something. That shouldn't be what it takes to cast a Chinese person, because quite frankly, you go to the doctor could be Chinese, the lawyer could be Chinese, the policeman. So when you're casting those roles, a Chinese actor should have just as much chance to win that role, but they don't. So that is where we need to work on. That is where and quite frankly, if somebody who's Chinese is up against the same job at the bank, for example, against a non-Chinese Canadian, do they have the same chance? Some people would say yes. Many people would say no, right?
Justin 方才講係即係 as a Chinese Canadian， 我哋嘅 identity 係何去何從咧？呢個係幾重要嘅問題。咁佢咧就即係 born in Canada 嘅，咁但係佢其實咧就因為咧就即係有啲 culture， 好似即係Chinese culture 係一個咁 unique 嘅。 咁所以就算佢個邊嘅 Canadian， 佢唔即係因為即係太吸引，亦都佢冇辦法令到 Chinese 個 Chinese 嘅個 culture 係 become visible to him。咁呢個係無可避免嘅。咁但係因為佢有咁嘅 identity， 兩樣都有嗰陣時，譬如簡單同大家講，喺一個sport 嘅 international sport game， 咁譬如一個 Olympic game。咁你係會cheer Canadian 啦，定話會 cheer Chinese 啊？咁梗係 depends on 邊一個 sport 啦，係咪啊？咁譬如話去到 Winter Olympic 嗰陣時，你會cheer Canadian 啦，定話 cheer Chinese？ 咁睇下邊一個，譬如 hockey 咁樣，梗係 Canada 啦，it all depends。咁所以其實我哋基本上咧就係我哋係一個Chinese Canadian， 就係我哋自己本身一個 identity 啦。咁其實喺我哋個 uniqueness 咧，其實喺一個社會裏邊咧，就好多人咧就做咗好多貢獻嘅。譬如 for example 好似Patrick Chan 啦嚇，佢有一個好嘅佢係一個skater 嚟嘅。咁 at the same time 咧，就譬如好似 Michael Chin 啦，咁即係呢啲係一個喺個社會上面咧就做到好 successful 嘅 financial mutual fund manager。咁呢啲全部咧就都係即係一個可以扮演一個好重要嘅角色嘅。但係譬如好似即係我哋喺度社區，我哋啲朋友有啲係 doctor， 譬如 Justin Poy 曾經喺 TDSP 做過好多嘢。咁所以其實呢啲每一個人嘅 story 咧，其實可以 stand out 我哋 as a Chinese Canadian。The way who we are 咁樣，咁所以其實呢個係一個好重要嘅信息。It's not just like somebody， 譬如好似 Justin 佢可以 take the lead，but then 我哋可以 mobilize 我哋嘅 community 好多唔同，佢哋喺唔同嘅area 做咗唔同嘅進步 ，contribute to 我哋嘅 society。咁呢個其實就係我哋要共同嘅處理嘅問題啊。
I couldn't help but laugh. Justin, you brought up my problem when I was a newcomer. Years ago, I was so stubborn. I was the one who resists in getting my Canadian citizenship. Because of this question, I asked myself, if there's a soccer competition between Canada and Hong Kong, which side I will cheer? That bothers me so much. And 10 years I refused until really my kids were born and so on. Everybody said, hey, why didn't you're still an immigrant, right? So one day I really start dreaming in English.
Oh, interesting. Oh.
Dreaming in English. Then I thought, okay, I'm convert. How
do you know that you are dreaming in English? You're dreaming already.
I'm dreamer, right?
What's interesting about Canada?
So that's why
I have friends from Hong Kong and from China who immigrated to Italy, who immigrated to England, who immigrated to other European countries like France. When a Chinese person immigrates to France, they don't call themselves a Chinese French person. They're still just Chinese. They don't call themselves, I'm a Chinese Italian. No, they're just, you are either, you will never be an Italian, right? When you immigrate, you will never, well, you can have citizenship, but Italians are never going to look at you or I and say, oh, you're Italian, right? But Canada was, our whole identity is about immigrants. Our whole identity. I mean, we know the indigenous people were the first people here. Before that, there was nobody. So we are a whole country of immigrants. And so therefore we must look at that immigrant experience and understand it for all of us, because we're all going through it, right? Now myself, I was born here, but yes, you know what? I tell people all the time, language and culture are two very different things. Okay. I know actually many people who can speak the language. They know nothing about the culture. A lot of these young Chinese that come over from China and they go to U of T and they can speak perfect Mandarin. They don't know anything about Chinese culture, nothing. In fact, they usually end up enrolling for a Chinese cultural program. And the professor is some old white guy who has spent, 20 years in China and teaches them about Chinese culture. is so a part of your upbringing. And the way my parents raised me, we are pretty traditional Chinese in terms of our beliefs, our not just things we celebrate, but it's really a belief system and how you raise your kids. that makes me, even though I was born here, it then also gives me that same feeling that you had. Like, what comes first, the Chinese part or the Canadian part, right? Yeah.
Hey, Justin, you know what I think? You are a likable person. I mean, I don't know, like, I just talked to you, half hour.
Yes.
I seems that, like we got a lifetime friend, because you are so convincing. You are attract to people, right? So, but anyway, 我要做我嘅 translation 。But Justin 方才講咗個幾得意嘅問題，我從來冇諗過嘅。佢講個問題就話，其實好多人咧就即係 Chinese Canadian 咧喺加拿大先至會發生。如果你邊個 Chinese，如果你到意大利或者去到法國，佢哋唔會視你 as Italian Chinese or French Chinese. You are either French or you are either Chinese. You are either Italian or you are Chinese. 呢樣嘢其實係好重要嘅。咁同埋好多人咧，佢譬如係 for example， 佢係一個中國人，但係佢未必了解晒好多中國嘅 culture 尤其是喺呢度嘅竹升係咪？咁所以其實咧好多時亦都好奇怪，譬如話有啲人有啲即係佢識得有啲朋友，佢中國係教中國嗰邊中國人嗰啲文化，佢自己本身唔係中國人嚇，咁其實咧就呢樣嘢咧係真係存在嘅。咁所以至於一個 culture 嗰樣嘢咧，係 up to us to take it on， 然之後咧就係將佢咧就即係維係落去我哋下個 generation 咁樣。But we are glad 我哋喺個 Chinese 咧，即係also a Canadian、Chinese Canadian 呢兩樣嘢係可以存在嘅，喺其他國家係唔可以存在。咁不如我哋喺呢個時間 ，let's take a break，so that we can have some commercial and we'll be right back。OK， 咁佢廣告。歡迎各位又嚟到家國生活，每逢晚上11點至12點喺 FM105.9 廣播直播室，依然有我哋嘅嘉賓 Justin Poy 伍雋雄，亦都我有 program host Josephine Park。我哋正話講到邊度
？Hi, welcome back, everybody. You know what? The Pure section, I think myself and Alec, we couldn't help but overspill, our, how we receive you. Oh, so warm, so charismatic, and so on. We are like instant friends. So I thought you are in the right career. Like you spend so many years in broadcast, and then you have one of the most successful advertising agency, right? Your own, and also, doing, promoting Canadian innovative medical technologies to the world, right? So I really want to get into peeling this layer of onion, getting into how to reach out everyone. That's your goal, and that's my goal too.
Well, okay, so this is a very interesting topic, and in fact, I speak about it every day with my clients. Especially, we have a lot of clients that are Chinese clients, and they specifically, want me to help them reach all Canadians. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that. If you're talking about, for example, an issue like COVID, let's go back a little bit. When we look at the Hong Kong Chinese population in Canada, we have been here for a very long time. And we had our own community. We had a very unique relationship with Canada. Now, we know as Hong Kong Chinese, we know that, because of a number of reasons, we are very different from Chinese from Taiwan. We're very different from Chinese from China. We are very different from, Chinese from Singapore and Malaysia. And right now, over the last, 15, 20 years, there's been a huge immigration of Chinese coming from China. Now, Hong Kong itself, because we never really had much of a political system. England sent a governor and that was it, right? And you mind your own business, you do your own business, you make money, and that was it. We were never really politically involved. You never really saw a lot of Chinese from Hong Kong getting involved with politics here, but we're entrepreneurial. We had set up some, beautiful organizations like Yihong and Manchang, and something changed. I'm not blaming anybody, but what happened was when a lot of the immigrants came from mainland China here, we were all basically, look, it's hard enough for Canadians to understand Chinese people. Never mind trying to understand Hong Kong Chinese, Taiwanese Chinese, mainland Chinese, they just lump everybody into one group, right?
Yeah.
And the people from China, I tell my Canadian friends, you have to understand them, you have to understand their history and where they came from. Like anybody who is from China, who is in their 50s or 60s, look at what their childhood was like. Look at how they grew up.
Very hardship.
How can they possibly understand and act the same way the Hong Kong Chinese do? So yes, while we are all technically one people, we are all very different. Now, the problem is when you look at in mainstream media, newspapers, for example, okay, and even worse, television and radio. Newspapers have maybe half a page to dedicate to an article. TV, they might give you 90 seconds if you're lucky, okay? How do you tell a complex story in 90 seconds? You cannot. You show one picture, you take the biggest brushstroke and you stroke the paint and say, that's it. That's the Chinese story, right? You can't possibly do that. So how do we fix this problem? Well, you're not going to fix it with the traditional media. As we know, there's no such thing as unbiased media. Every publication has their own political leaning. Depending on who's in government, they have to lean, maybe more that way. They bring, and when it was just the Hong Kong Chinese, we didn't have any political clout, right? There was never any problem between Hong Kong and Canada. But now that we're dealing with China, which is a juggernaut and arguably as powerful as our biggest neighbor, now you're getting into politics and and the way that reporters write. They're trying to be very careful. They might have to take a certain position to satisfy the publisher. That's where you're never going to get through. But thankfully, there is light at the end of the tunnel, because the number of newspaper readers is extremely low. The number of people who watch broadcast television is extremely low. So what do we have at our disposal now? Now we have digital media, we've got social media, we have so many ways to reach people directly now. So what I recommend to people is that let's use those channels to get our own stories out, unfiltered. Because even if the Toronto Star said, Josephine, Alec, we want to do a story and we'd like to interview you guys, that story is going to go through so many filters. You may not even recognize the article after. So I would suggest let's use our own means to reach people. We have the technology to directly reach. Look, you're doing a radio interview now, which is going over the airwaves, but you're also recording this on Zoom. Now that one, we can make it social and get it out to as many people as we want. And that's what we need to do. We need to do that better. I find that in the Chinese community, we tend to isolate ourselves. We will, you look at my friends from China, they will circulate a story only within WeChat. Well, then don't expect some Canadians to see it, right? Yeah. And, they must be written properly. They must be written in English. They, and they need to go out to the right people, because if they don't go out to the right people, then we can't expect change to happen, right?
Justin 講咗一個幾重要嘅問題，即係佢其實 summarize 咗，其實即係傳媒個角色喺呢個華裔社區對呢個 Chinese Canadian 喺加拿大嘅形象。咁最主要其實好簡單嘅問題，因為即係喺加拿大裏邊嘅華人有早期喺香港嚟嘅。咁佢哋嚟咗好多年啦 ，well established 啊，咁佢哋never border 呢啲政治嗰方面啦，咁係最近呢10幾年咧就全部喺中國內地嚟嘅啦。咁如果你好多朋友問佢，即係你話即係中國內嚟嗰啲移民其實點解同嗰啲香港人有少少唔同嘅咧？佢其實你要 expect， 因為中國內地嚟人佢哋譬如50零歲嘅。佢高呼嗰個階段係好多黑雪嘅，根本上係同即係譬如香港嗰班咧，係即係過嚟嗰陣時咧，就係唔係話好大嘅問題，即係比較上 easy like。咁所以大家嗰個 outcome 係絕對唔同嘅。咁而至於喺嗰個呢個傳媒嗰方面係 Chinese Canadian， 你會睇到咧，嗰啲傳媒咧就唔可以即係始終係佢哋有個 agenda in 佢嘅 story。佢未必話，譬如話主流好多嘢佢要 cover。 如果要 cover Chinese Canadian， 可能係90 second 或者未必 more， 但係唔會話好大篇幅。有咩可能喺呢咁短嘅時間，嗰個 Canadian 嗰啲主流嘅傳媒可以傳播到信息俾大家知道 Chinese Canadian 係點樣樣嘅？呢個係 very hard 嘅。但係最重要咧，就因為家下所有傳統嘅 media 咧已經開始就式微，而好多 digital media 咧就嚟緊。其實我哋需要咧就用呢啲 digital media， 將嗰啲 story 咧 unfilter， 將個 true story 講翻出嚟，咁令到大家知道唔係 one side 係主流傳媒傳播某種中國嘅信息或者 Chinese 嘅信息，係我哋喺其他嘅信息個digital 嘅 media 可以出一啲比較上即係冇被改過或者 filter 過嘅 message。咁而嗰啲 Chinese media 亦都 at the same time 咧，就唔好喺個 Chinese 嗰度，譬如 WeChat 或者 WhatsApp 嗰度傳播。應該將佢 translate to English， 咁令到大家可以知道一個 true Chinese Canadian 係點樣樣嚇。
Now we do have an advocate, you know, in the mainstream media. We do have some. I mean, you know, Tony Wong at the Toronto Star. I mean, I actually interviewed him for my series. That's actually going to be the next episode. You know, he's done business, he's done technology, he's a TV critic. He's been a great voice. He's written some fantastic articles in the Toronto Star on the issue of racism and things like that. But, you know, he's just one voice. And also here is the struggle for a guy in his situation. He's been hired as a writer for the Toronto Star. So while yes, he brings his culture and his lens to his job, he can't write every story about Chinese, right? I mean, at the end of the day, he has to write as a Toronto Star reporter. And you know, the same, and quite frankly, the same conflict comes with the politicians. You know, look at our local politicians. They usually get elected because of their constituency. They might live in an area that has a lot of Chinese voters, and they like to vote for them. But then once they're in office, they are a Canadian politician. So while they do feel a lot of pressure to pay special attention to their community, they have to also make sure that they are looking after all Canadians, right? And that always becomes the challenge, the struggle. It's the challenge. Yes, it's the challenge. You know, Raymond Chan, our one of our Secretary of States for the Liberal Party years ago, I think he had gone to Malaysia, and he had brought up issues about how the Chinese were being treated in certain parts of Southeast Asia. And he got blasted by that prime minister who said, "Are you here as a Canadian politician? Or are you here as a Chinese politician?" Right?
Yeah.
And I get it. You know, I get it. While you want, it's the same pressure that was put on Barack Obama. You know, the Black community said, "Oh my God, you know, we thought we finally had one of our own, and he didn't do enough." Well, what do you expect? He had to be the president for all Americans, right? So it is very tough. So I think we need to take this into our own hands, Josephine and Alec. We need to put out our own stories. This is what I am trying to do with my video series. And quite frankly, if everybody who has a voice, yourselves included, what you're doing this program, if everybody did what they could to get a message out, like really, you know, made an effort, take the time. You guys are volunteers. You know, I'm doing that as a volunteer. If everybody took a little bit of time to put a message out, we could make huge noise, huge.
Justin 咧就即係講咗一個我覺得係相當之重要嘅問題。咁譬如話即係even 即係 for example 啲 media 好似 Tony Wong 咁樣，佢係 Toronto Star 嘅 writer，right？ 咁但係佢係 can do a lot 嗰啲 Chinese Canadian introduce Chinese Canadian 去個主流嗰度。But at the same time he's also a reporter for Toronto Star， 所以佢個 role 咧。就係比較上係即係有少少，即係佢唔可以 specifically 淨係做嗰樣嘢，佢可能要 fulfill 個 editor 嘅 requirement。Same thing 好似啲 politician 咁樣，咁其實佢可能係譬如話，好似 Universal 咁好多中國人投咗佢票嗰時，佢選到之後，咁佢就要 represent all Canadian， 唔係淨係 Chinese。咁所以有陣時咧比較上尷尬嘅。咁譬如佢有個朋友啊，即係陳卓瑜啦，大家都知啦， 即係以前即係嘅廳長，係呢個 citizenship 嘅廳長。佢去到馬來西亞嗰陣時咧，就曾經咧就即係同嗰邊啲 Prime Minister 傾過偈，話佢哋點樣對嗰邊啲 Chinese 啊，即係有啲 hardship 啊，做到啲不公平嘅嘢。人哋嘅 Prime Minister 就即係問佢：你而家係以咩身份同我講嘢？你係以個 Canadian 嘅身份。咁所以其實咧，有陣時政治人物可以做到嘅嘢係好多掣肘嘅，反而咧，我哋 as 即係 person， 我哋可以即係用我哋嘅力量。Justin 自己本身佢自己都係一個好有 seasoning 嘅 journalist， 佢可以用佢個渠道。我哋 as FM105.9嘅嗰個 Canada Living 嘅 volunteer program， 我哋可以亦都做呢咁嘅嘢，亦都 mobilize 其他啲朋友，佢哋喺佢哋崗位做一啲同類型嘅嘢，將我哋嘅 Chinese Canadian， 我哋可以 contribute 做到咩嘢 ？Who we are 呢個係我哋即係大家都需要即係背負嘅責任。
Right. I'm glad that you mentioned Tony Wong. Actually, we dealt with him last year. He did give us a good coverage about the COVID, fundraising program we have for across GTA. But I think each one of us is now trying to build our list of reporters in the mainstream media that we can reach out. Okay. Yeah. Naturally, it's doesn't always work because, like you mentioned, they still have to go through the editor. Can I write an article, a feature article on this and that, right? Even as a reporter, you're not free will, to do whatever you like. So anyway, that's really nice to hear from you, and I really look forward to your interview, of him on YouTube. The other thing is, I know that you're very successful in engaging like the South Asian community and other, to advance your business, right? I think, everyone in new, especially people who graduate, they really need to know how to leverage the assets of all the diverse community groups to advance, right? There's really no point of, if you just really have one group of friends, how fast you can advance, your business will be restricted to Chinese only, right? So now my next question is, I find that sometimes it's very hard for a newcomer how to start a friendship and conversation with somebody they don't know. That is not, somebody is a very natural, they are a natural speaker, they can dive into, conversation or without a drink, right? But how would you, what is your advice to them how to start?
Well, so that, and that's interesting because I've spoken to many university classes about this, more relating to the business side to help them in business. But I mean, there have studies have shown that your climb up the corporate ladder will be definitely limited if you do not interact with your coworkers. If at lunchtime you go off to some corner and you bring your little lunch bag and you don't talk to anybody, even if you're the smartest man in the room or the smartest woman in the room, you will not move up that ladder. There's research that backs that up. So this is what I always recommend, is that, and I was just speaking, I did the morning assembly for UCC on Monday, and, and they have their own Asian Heritage Month program, a great young group of boys put their program together. The principal said, yeah, we want all of our school to hear about Asian Heritage Month. I thought that was wonderful. But, that was first one of my messages. I told them the consequences if you do not integrate. Okay, when you come to Canada, while we do celebrate diversity, we also now, you may have noticed that we pair it with another word, which is inclusion. So diversity is appreciating our differences. Inclusion is appreciating those differences and then including it in everybody, right? And including everybody in that, in our larger group. So really, very often we come here, and if you are from a particular country, you got the diversity part down, that comes naturally. But now you got to work on the inclusion. And, corporations, they have diversity and inclusion managers now. I know that, there's been some very high profile appointments, like at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. There was a very high-profile entertainment appointment of a vice president of diversity and inclusion. But a lot of organizations don't have that. Or if you are a student or you are a full-time stay-at-home mom, how do you meet people? And you know, we are not the most you know, growing up in Canada, I grew up with a very sort of extroverted personality. But you know, anytime I go back, you know, I go back to China quite frequently, and they all ask me if I'm American because they say, "Wow, you're pretty loud. You talk like an American." And you know, it's just that you know, the sometimes we inherit this as a Chinese culture that we're much more subdued and quieter. And you're right. It's how do you go up to a complete stranger and just talk? Well, that's not exactly how you're going to do it. You're not just going to go up to a stranger in the grocery store or a restaurant or on the street and say, "Hey, I just came to Canada. You know, do you want to be friends?" It doesn't really work like that. But how it could work, and how I you know, and quite frankly, how I got started in life was by volunteering. Getting involved with causes that you care about. Like a lot of people see volunteer as work, but I said, well, then that means you're doing the wrong volunteer work. When you volunteer, you should be volunteering for something you love. So when you are at that meeting or you're there on a Saturday at 8 a.m. helping out, you love it because this is your passion. If you get involved with your passion, and you know, say you come from China, you come from Hong Kong, you get to Canada, the first thing I would do, even if I moved to another country tomorrow, I would first think of, okay, what are the causes I care about? Okay, I care about a children's hospital. Fine. Let me see what organizations help the children. Right. I would give them a call and say, listen, you know, my English is not so good, but I really would love to help you. Do you have anything? And I guarantee they will get you to help. And when you are there, you're going to meet people from all sorts of communities. And you don't even need to break the ice, Josephine, because the passion that you have will break the ice for you, right?
Josephine 咧，其實問咗個問題咧就相當之好嘅，係我哋譬如話，如果我哋as a Chinese Canadian，我哋想 reach out make 多啲 friend，係有啲咩方法啦？咁Justin 咧就佢講咗佢其實咧就係即係佢喺大學裏邊咧就有啲講座係教啲人咧。即係點樣喺個商界裏邊咧，就即係 make friend 啊，咁或者喺職場點樣 make friend 啊？其實如果你喺職場嗰度咧，如果你唔同人即係有溝通咧，你食 lunch 自己買個 lunch box 咁啊，自己坐喺個位食咧，嗰個你唔會喺個 career 做得好。你一定要即係多啲同人溝通，即係呢個喺一個加拿大係一個 diversify 嘅社會，係所謂 diversify 咧，就即係大家我哋要 appreciate 我哋有個 different， 但係其實家最重要嘅樣就係 inclusion， 我哋唔淨止要 appreciate 個 different，at the same time we are bring it together， 我哋 as being the same， 即係我哋係朋友咁樣，係即係令到佢可以大家融入喺埋一齊。咁呢個其實係一個比較重要嘅。咁其實你好多時會擔心話，喂，如果我係即係冇一個職場嘅環境，或者而且咧就即係可能未必有咁多時間。咁有啲咩方法可以 make friend？ 最好嘅一樣嘢咧就做 volunteer work。譬如你係中意即係 sick kid hospital 嘅，去嗰度 volunteer。你話我英文唔係幾好，但係根本上你去到嗰陣時，當你做 volunteer 嗰陣時，大家會開始接受你。At the same time 咧，就亦都想 understand 你，咁個過程，咁大家可以彼此咧就即係將個距離收近咗，佢明白你多啲，明白你as a Chinese Canadian 多啲，你又明白佢哋多啲。
係 ，Okay. My following question is a little bit personal. Okay. I hope you are not shy to share it. Well, Justin comes from almost, the unofficial first family in Canada. Her aunt is, former Governor General Adrian Clarkson, and her mom is former senator, first Chinese senator and chancellor of U of T, Vivian Poy, and his father is also a famous plastic surgeon. So did you grow up in stress? How are you going to channel all the expectations into motivation, or instead of like a rebellion?
Well, so that's a very interesting question. And I get asked it a lot, actually. I'll give you a, the straight, honest answer is that my parents, they really understand kids. They knew that the best pressure is to put no pressure. And, a lot of parents will look at, I have two brothers. A lot of people don't even know that. They will look at three brothers, and a lot of parents will treat them all the same. My parents knew each one of our personalities very well. I used to put a lot of pressure on myself. I remember even asking my father once, how come you never get after me the same way you get after my brothers? And he said, I don't need to. He said, you put so much pressure on yourself. I don't need to tell you to clean up your room or study hard or anything. My parents really understood each one of us. The one thing is this, they also, when parents say, I just want my kids to be happy, I would say that when you hear parents say that, most of them don't actually mean it. They want the kids to be happy, but they want them to be happy doing what they want them to do. I want you to be happy as long as you're a doctor. I want you to be happy as long as you're a lawyer. My parents really meant it. When they said, I just want my kids to be happy, they really meant it. My older brother, he never really, like you talked about rebellion. I guess there was a bit of rebellion there. He ended up traveling a lot. He's very accomplished. He has a lot of degrees, but he was never really career driven like I was. So, but my parents were fine with that. They said, listen, as long as he is happy. I have a younger brother who lives in Shanghai. He's a corporate guy. He works for Nike. He took a different path than me, but sure. Would my father have wanted one of us to become a surgeon? Absolutely. But there was no pressure when we decided not to do what we thought they wanted to do. And that's very interesting because I think that it is up to the child too. Like I was very forceful in saying, look, no, this is what I want to do. And I think that children who have parents who are very overbearing, they do need to understand, even if you can twist your kid's arm and make them become a doctor, they may not have the happiest life later. So I think it's best to really know your children. And my parents certainly did know us very well. Yeah.
Josephine 就問咗Justin 一個問題，就話佢佢邊即係佢媽咪 Vivian Poy 係一個 senator，佢 father 係一個 plastic surgeon，佢個 aunt 亦都係 Governor General。咁喺咁嘅背景嗰度長大，其實即係一個點樣嘅成長嘅方式啊？咁啊 Justin 咧就解釋得好清楚，佢其實即係佢個 parent 係好識得即係教小朋友嘅，就好識做 parent 嘅。佢哋唔係一個即係喺個 open 嘅 concept， 同埋佢唔同嘅兄弟姊妹咧，佢係即係用唔同嘅方式嘅。咁啊 Justin 係比較 try hard 啲嘅，咁所以 parent 又用啲 different way of mobilize 佢to become who he is， right？ 咁其實即係呢個係相當之 interesting 嘅。咁我自己咧都係一個即係我哋都係一個 open 嘅 parent 嚟嘅。咁其實我哋唔 push 我啲細路嘅，we just provide them 佢哋最需要嘅嘢嘅 condition to make them success。因為有啲嘢 push 唔到嘅，我覺得呢樣嘢係即係嚟到加拿大好多人會體會到啊！我唔知 Josephine 點睇呢個問題啊？
Oh, you know what? I'm just a free parent. When, during the night, I always, before exam, I ask my kids, come down, enjoy the tea with me. It's too late to study, just enjoy and, blast out the music and dance or whatever. So,
I understand. Look, I get it. Look, the immigrant experience for some people is very tough. For people that don't have a lot of financial means, it takes everything they have. They get here and they have maybe one child or two children. And you know what? They said, I'll be damned if I'm going to let you become a musician and ruin all this work I did. I totally understand it. But at the same time, I think that the way society is today, we need to also understand that people live to be happy. We don't just live to work like, 40 years ago. Right. The other thing that parents need to understand is that there are careers that your child may excel in that don't even exist right now. You know, being a vice president of social media in a corporation will be a high-paying six-figure salary. Being a vice president of digital experience in a bank will pay sometimes more than what, you know, the loan people make. Those are jobs that didn't, if you mentioned that 20 years ago, oh yeah, I want to be a digital experience vice president. People are like, what is that? That's not even a job. So the jobs that the parents think they want their kids in, maybe they will be suitable for a job that doesn't even exist right now, but it will exist, right?
Yeah, yeah. So thank you so very much, Justin, for sharing us, you know, lots of good tips today. And you are so successful, you know, with a busy career in venture capital and Justin Poy agency, and also Inno3, right? So you know, like I think, you know, we need to get you back to talk about digital money.
It would be my pleasure.
Toronto International Film Festival, right? So anyway, thank you so much. A very interesting, you know, session with you. Thank you.
多謝晒Justin 今晚真係相當之高興認識你。拜拜。
Bye bye.
Thank you.